Welcome to the program, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman.
It's my honor, my pleasure.
I would like to start with the mobilization in Ukraine. Ukraine is in the middle of mobilization campaign. Many civilians are being conscripted and enrolled to the armed forces of Ukraine. In one of your lectures, you said that killing is not a big deal if you are fully prepared for that. Does it mean that anyone can kill an enemy on the battlefield?
Well, with modern training, with simulators and pop-up targets, we've made killing almost a conditioned response. Your training will make you able to do the job. You have confidence in modern training. But we've got to be able to live with what we've been trained to do. Most people's response is joy. I've hit the target. I did my job. I saved people's lives. I saved my own life. Some called survivor euphoria. But then people feel bad. They didn't feel bad. You know, if you could choose how you responded, there's many ways people respond. They're all okay. But if you could choose how you responded, I think you want to feel okay about it. You want to feel good about it. But then there's this backlash as people are troubled by that. And then there's the rationalization process where we go about understanding that and dealing with that. And that's kind of the core of my book on killing. It's over 500,000 copies sold in English, translated into 9 languages now, counting Ukrainian. And it gives a good insight into how people are going to respond to killing on the battlefield. And again, the World War II generation, in America, we call them the greatest generation. And they truly were. They weren't destroyed by what they had to do. They were stronger. We talk a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, but far more common is post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. That's the greatest generation. And that truly is what is going to come out of years of war from Ukraine, is post-traumatic growth. Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. But Nietzsche stole that from the Bible. 2,000 years before Nietzsche, the Bible said the same thing. The idea of being stronger from the bad things in life is not a new idea. You know, waving the victim card, that's kind of a new idea. So there's many ways people respond. They're all okay. But again, for those who have prepared themselves, for those who are fighting to defend their nation in the name of liberty, and there's something else. In America, in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, we drafted 18-year-old kids, and 18-year-old kids, they've got a very small perspective on the world, and it really is better to have mature individuals. And Ukraine is doing that. And I would tell you that's a good thing. You're not taking children, 18 years old. You're taking mature individuals who have mentally and emotionally prepared themselves, and that's a good thing.
Today, our age for mobilization is from 25 years old to 60 years old. Some people say that it would be better to conscript also young men from 18 years old. Does it mean that you do not support such point and you think that it's better to mobilize from 25 years old?
Yeah. But if I could choose, if it were my choice, I would rather have 25-year-olds than 18-year-olds.
But why?
Because they're mature. They have many more life experiences. They're better able to deal with the challenges they will face. There's nothing wrong with 18-year-olds. That's what won World War II for us, Nothing wrong with that. But if you have the luxury of making a choice, there's value in choosing those mature individuals. In 20 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they've all been volunteers. Nobody's drafted. A lot of them were 18 years old, but an awful lot of them are 25, 30, 35 years old. After 9/11, we had people from all ages and all walks of life after the terrorist attacks on 9/11 who volunteered, and we found that those mature individuals have got far better ability to deal with the complexity of what needs to happen.
Some people say that they are not born for a war, that they are afraid of shooting another human being, that they are not capable of shooting, of killing another person.
Yeah.
What is your take on that? Do you really believe that some people simply cannot fight the war, cannot kill another human being?
In World War II, we found out that only 15 to 20% of the individual riflemen would pull the trigger. Now, if there's a leader standing over your shoulder demanding you fire, everybody fire. Cruiser weapons, like a machine gun with a gunner and assistant gunner, always fired because they had this group dynamic. Key weapons, like a BAR or a flamethrower, almost always fired because everybody knew if it was shooting or not. But the individual soldier, when he hits the dirt and he's all alone and he's given the choice to fire in World War II, the majority of them wouldn't pull the trigger. Now, we knew this is true, and we fixed it. And we made killing a conditioned response. In World War II, we taught our soldiers to shoot bullseye targets. We have no known cases of any bullseyes ever attacking our troops. Any Americans who've been in war since the Korean War never once shot a bullseye. A man-shaped silhouette pops in a field of view. You hit the target, target drops. Stimulus response, like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Modern training makes killing a conditioned response. The firing rate in Vietnam was up to 95%. In Iraq and Afghanistan, it's also been 95, 98%. And with the introduction of simulators, we brought not just the firing rate up, but we brought the hit rate up. And so the troops who were functioning in Iraq and Afghanistan in close combat were orders of magnitude better than World War II, and significantly better even than Vietnam, with modern simulators really creating this concept of a pre-battle veteran. And although you've never been in combat, you've had simulation of such intensity that when combat happens, it's no big deal. It's called stress inoculation. And the modern Western, I've trained our British troops in this war, I've trained Canadian troops, I've trained hundreds of American units. And those individuals with modern training, which is the Western training, which is what Ukraine is receiving, have been performing at levels beyond anything we've ever seen before in history.
Some, or even not all people, they're afraid of a war just as human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, those civilians.
Yeah.
How it is possible to overcome this fear?
And that's really the core of my book on combat. I have a son who just retired after 27 years, 10 combat tours, 3 Bronze Stars. I have a grandson in the Army now. But the book on combat was a book I wrote for my son to prepare him for his first combat tour, the invasion of Afghanistan. And I just had the honor to talk to your Army Academy here about these things that will happen. Everybody knows fear, but your training will kick in. You will do what you're trained to do. There's nothing wrong with being afraid. Fear is a survival mechanism. You have confidence in your training, but it's really important for people to be warned what's going to happen. One of the things that happens is tunnel vision. And it's a normal dynamic, but bad guys have tunnel vision too. And if you put fire on them and then maneuver around the flank, auditory exclusion. Most hunters know that when you fire your rifle one time at the range without hearing protection, your ears will ring for the rest of the day. You go to shoot a deer, boom, people a mile away hear it. Hunters hear nothing, and their ears don't ring. I tell them, you're still getting hearing loss. But this auditory exclusion, the shots get muted in combat. How could we have had 500 years of gunpowder combat and not let people know what every hunter knows? The shots get muted. So we got auditory exclusion, we got tunnel vision, we got slow motion time. I have had hundreds of people tell me they can see the bullet in combat. It's like airsoft or paintball. If you've ever done it with slow enough, you can track with your eyes. And on several occasions, they walk up and point to where the bullet hit. No way they could have done that if they weren't tracking with their eyes like they said they were. One of the real common responses is autopilot. You're doing what you're trained to do without conscious thought. I train law enforcement in America. I'm the only person ever to be certified to train police in all 50 states. And police talk about the gun just appeared in their hand. That's autopilot. You do not rise to the challenge, you sink the level of your training. Half of all trained seasoned cops have memory gaps, just blackouts. Sometimes it'll come back after a couple of days, sometimes it never comes back. About 1 out of 5 have memory distortions. They just flat remember something that did not happen. So we're warned about these things. We got slow motion time, we got tunnel vision, we got autopilot, but then we got these memory gaps, these memory distortions. And one of the most important things we do is after combat, the unit talks about what happened, usually at the squad level, never more than the platoon level, because people get lost. Everybody talks about what happened. Now, in our training, in the training events, in training, the majority of the learning happens afterwards, what we call the AAR, the after action review. I did this and I did that. Oh, I did this and I did that. Oh, that's when this happened. The majority of the learning, I should have done this. Next time I'll do this. The majority of the learning happens afterwards in the AAR. So how much more so should we capture the lessons learned when it's real combat? And we also fill in the memory gaps, sort out the memory distortions. But it's so important for people to know these things ahead of time. Now, if you were sitting here right now, boom, auditory exclusion, slow motion time, tunnel vision, memory gaps, memory distortions, it would scare the hell out of you. It meets every definition of a psychotic episode. But if you've been warned these things will happen, it's not that big a deal. When the first Canadian unit deployed to Afghanistan, it was Canada's first shooting war since Korea. They did everything they could to try to prepare their troops, including having me present to the regiment. And one regimental commander told me, he said, we brought the first batch back, and we asked the boys, okay, what worked? They said, Grossman. He told us what would happen. He told us what to do about it. Now, understanding that these things are happening, but we expect crazy things in the heat of battle. The thing that really bothers people is a week later, a month later, a year later, something will trigger the memory and you re-experience the event. Your heart is pounding, you're gasping for air. That is not PTSD. It's normal. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. You know, a bunch of Marines that I had trained would give me kind of a back brief. And they said, we're all sitting around having a beer together. Now, just sitting over beer is pretty good because the act of drinking, swallowing, pulls you from fight or flight to rest and digest. It pulls you from sympathetic to parasympathetic processes. So we're talking over beer, and we talked about re-experiencing the event. One guy said, I was walking down a busy city street with the wife and kids. There's heavy traffic in the street. There's cars parked by the curb. I'm by the curb, wife and kids, and something backfires. Loud noise. Boom! He said, next thing I know, I'm in the gutter under a car. I look up, there's the wife and kids. It's okay. This is normal. We're warned this might happen. And if you've been warned, then it's not that big a deal. One soldier told me he'd been home for like a day or so. He's with his little 3-year-old boy. And a loud noise goes up, boom. He said, hit the dirt. And look up. And he said, there's my little 3-year-old boy looking at the eyes that big. I got up my knees, put my hand on my little boy's shoulder. He said, those are called combat reflexes. They kept Daddy alive in combat. It'll take a while for that to go away. But if we're not warned those things are happening, they scare the daylights out of you. Now, when you re-experience the event, that is not PTSD. Arkansas State Trooper, first gunfight. Bad guy's down, he's alive, happy ending of this story. It says, a week later, I'm sitting in the bleachers with my wife, watching our daughter at a swim meet. A swim meet. What do you suppose pushes this button? The starter's gun went off when I didn't expect it. Boom! My heart's pounding, gasping for air, drenched with sweat. His wife thought he's having a heart attack. He didn't know what was happening. But this is the neural pathway that was established in combat, firing again. And he dealt with it, and he was fine. But what if he said, I could never go to a swim meet again? I can't stand fireworks. I can't do my job anymore. I hate all loud noises. You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. You got to separate that memory from the emotions. Now, one of the best tools we have is a big swig of water. That big swig of water takes you from fight or flight, sympathetic, to parasympathetic. Now, there's other tools, a breathing exercise in my book. If you can't leash it in by yourself, then the docs are really, really good. We're very, very good at treating post-traumatic stress disorder. But you got to let us know. And how can we help other people if we can't help ourselves? And we're very, very good. The vast, vast majority of our veterans do not commit suicide. The vast, vast majority of our veterans did not get PTSD. They got post-traumatic growth. Now, one last little nugget that we've learned in 20 years of war. If you are sleep deprived and a traumatic event happens, you're far less able to prepare for it. And we don't want to create this expectation of a problem. But our Veterans Administration says if you're sleep deprived, you've gone without sleep for 24 hours, and a traumatic event happens, you're 5 times more likely to get PTSD. You're 6 times more likely to get suicidal ideation, and 9 times more likely to get depression. Throughout human history, in combat, we always took the nights off. I mean, it got dark, and we stopped fighting. And we always were able to kind of take a break and talk around the campfire. But now we've got combat 24 hours a day. And we've got to understand how important it is for people to get enough sleep. There's a real tendency for them to get on their cell phone, to play a video game, to get on social media. And all of these things that get in the way of their sleep cannot be acceptable. You know, I trained a U.S. infantry battalion, and the command sergeant major had been with his battalion on the last deployment. And he said, on our last deployment, we were in like a barracks environment at night, and then combat tours during the day. And the troops had televisions and video games. And he said, I told my troops, I said, it's lights out, 10 o'clock every night. He said, if I catch you playing video games after 10 o'clock, I'm going to take your video game. He said, a week later, I had a closet overflowing with video games. He said, these are good troops. They wouldn't disobey an order. But he said, they can't not play those damn games. The attraction. Have you ever played the game and suddenly at 6 o'clock in the morning, you got no idea where the last 8 hours went, it's time to get dressed and go to work? Well, they do that on purpose. It's called a flow state. And they steal your sleep and they steal your time. And sleep deprivation is a key factor in suicide, a huge factor in suicide. It's a key factor in traffic deaths. Sleep deprivation, we now know, is a key factor in Alzheimer's and dementia. Long-term sleep deprivation is doing terrible harm to your body. And so what we begin to understand is how damned important it is to make people get enough sleep. And throughout history, that wasn't hard. When there was nothing to do, they went to sleep. Now there's nothing to do, and they play a video game, or they get on social media, or they binge watch TV shows. The head of Netflix said their competitor is sleep. The corporate policy of Netflix is to steal your sleep. They don't care that they're killing people. They just want to sell their product. So we need to understand that we're in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. And here's parenting 101 for the 21st century. When you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. No laptop in the room, no cell phone in the room. They've got to go to the room and sleep. Now, worldwide, teen suicides have exploded. Teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-old teenage girls' suicide rate has tripled per capita in just the last decade in America. And if they're not getting that sleep, one of the major killers of kids around the planet, exploded, is suicide. So a police officer came up to me in one of my classes during a break. He said, I had a good girl. She was an A student. She was one of those teenagers. He didn't say what age, but 10, 11, 12-year-old teenagers. He said, she was an A student. She was a good girl. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. He said, okay, I trust you. Keep your cell phone. He said, a little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. He said, we never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying. She's being bullied. And he can't just ignore that. We're not wired that way. He said it was heart-rending to see up all night long, night after night, trying to defend herself. He said, I immediately understood my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand until now, she was sleep deprived, tormented and bullied to death in front of my eyes, and I let it happen. He said, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How can we expect our kids to? He said, the one thing on earth I'd done for my little girl was take her cell phone every night, let her turn off all the bad stuff in this world. So I asked my soldiers, I said, who's going to be your mommy? Who's going to make you get that sleep? If you're sleep deprived, and you're far more likely to let your buddies down. And again, the lure of playing those games all night long. Oh, I'm just going to play for 15 minutes, and boom, suddenly half your night is gone, and you threw away 4 hours of sleep. So what we're finding is, in this modern era, our greatest challenge is to make sure that people get enough sleep. And for their performance in combat and their wellness throughout life, that's one challenge that has never been there throughout history. In World War II, there's nothing to do. They read a little bit, talk a little bit, go to sleep. There was nothing to do. Now we got all these amazingly attractive, seductive things. And we begin to understand that the greatest challenge on the modern battlefield is making sure our people get enough sleep. So for those who fully prepare themselves, killing's not that big a deal. And that's the book on killing, how your body responds. And by the way, the same kind of killing training that we get in modern training, the video games can be doing the same thing to kids. In combat, people will do what they've been trained to do, and they've been trained well. Have confidence in your training. There's this deep satisfaction of hitting the target, and there's nothing wrong with that. There will be a lot of things like auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, slow motion time, memory gaps, and memory distortions. And they're normal. Don't be troubled by these things. It's really important to get together as soon as we can. Everybody has a bottle of water or a canteen of water. Talk about what happened. And every time they start to become emotional, take a big swig of water and separate the memory from the emotions. Now, a week later, a month later, a year later, something will trigger that memory. You re-experience the event. It is not PTSD. It's normal. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. You cannot not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. If you can't separate the memory from the emotions, then get help. The docs are really, really good. We're really good at treating PTSD, but you got to let us know. How can we help other people if we can't help ourselves? One last thing. The citizens of a democracy, the citizens of a free nation, are the finest warriors the world has ever seen. Every time you put the citizens of a democracy against the citizens of a dictatorship, a totalitarian nation like Russia, they get their asses kicked. And have faith in the citizens of this nation who are rising to this challenge. And what they're doing right now is inspiring the world. And it's what the free citizens of a free nation fighting for their liberty, fighting for their families, and fighting for their children. This is what it ought to look like. And have faith and have confidence in who you are and what you're doing.
And my last question for you, you mentioned about the PTSD. What would you personally recommend to the Ukrainian government how to help people to facilitate this, to help with this problem after the combat?
Yeah. First, we've got to educate people. They've got to know that these responses are normal. And they've got to know that the key is to separate the memory from the emotions. And quite frankly, talking over beer is one of the healthiest things you can do. All right, you get talking about it, you start to become emotional, what do? Biggest swig of beer, regain control and keep talking. It's really one of the healthiest things you do until you get drunk, and then it's counterproductive, right? But let people know if we're re-experiencing the event, that's normal. You know, like the soldier, the loud noise goes out, boom, he hits the dirt. Well, these things are normal. But if it doesn't go away over time, then get help and create this environment which is okay to get help. But it's so important that we create a positive expectation. A new greatest generation is rising up. Ukraine will see an era of great leadership and prosperity and growth come out of this war, just like we did, the United States, out of World War II. What doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. And we should have faith that this nation has got some amazing, glorious, incredible years in front of it as we come out the other end of this war with the new greatest generation that's rising up. They got to be informed, and if there is a problem, they got to deal with it. And our nation needs to accept that responsibility. But it's all about letting them know what's going to happen. And my book on combat is the best tool we got. It became a bestseller during the pandemic in the medical community. #1 bestseller across the medical community in a pandemic, because one doc said dealing with the stress of combat and the stress of an emergency room in a pandemic have a lot to teach us. And so we've got a tool now that can help people be informed and be aware with that book. And we can proceed in that direction as informed and healthy members of a free nation.
Thank you, Mr. Grossman, for your time and for your support.
Daniel, it's my pleasure.
For Ukraine and glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.